Yo guys, what's up? Ghost here. Today we're talking about what would make you buy the next Battlefield game. If you've left the series and you're feeling a bit pessimistic about the future of Battlefield, what do DICE and EA need to do to bring the series back for you? So a few days ago I reached out to you guys on YouTube, Twitter and Discord and asked you this question. What would make you buy the next Battlefield game? And I got a ton of great responses with lots of great ideas and opinions, so thank you to all of you who responded. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, going over all of the community's ideas for the next Battlefield title, but whatever the next game is, I will definitely be covering it, so hit that sub button if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on any future videos. Alright, so let's dig in here. Like I said, you guys stepped up and gave me a ton of great responses, so I'm going to split the video into sections to cover everything, starting with the setting and overall direction of the game. Out of all the comments I had, without a doubt the most common thing that people wanted is a modern setting, which probably comes as no surprise. Personally, I think this should be a modern setting in a fictional world, so that DICE don't have to tie themselves down to real world realities like they did with Battlefield 5, and I mean look where that got them in the end. Some people also wanted to see Vietnam or Bad Company 3, but the overwhelming majority seem to want a modern setting. I even had quite a number of people suggest a Battlefield 3 or BF4 remaster, although honestly I don't think those games have quite been out long enough yet for them to really qualify for a remaster. Maybe Battlefield 2 has, but I think generally what people mean by this is that they want the new game to be similar to Battlefield 3 and 4. Okay, next up, a lot of you wanted more identifiable soldier class skins. So basically for DICE to bring back uniforms where you can tell which class you're up against. This has always been a massive issue for me in Battlefield 5. What with all the cosmetic skins available for purchase, it was never instantly clear to me what class the enemy soldier was actually playing. In Battlefield 4 I thought it was obvious. Each class had its own distinct look, and even from great distances I could easily identify an engineer, or a recon player or whatever it was. So I think we'd like to see a return to that. Having multiple skins to choose from is of course nice as well, and these days it's something that most games are doing, but if you take the case of, say, Call of Duty, there are no soldier classes. You're just up against an enemy soldier, right? But in Battlefield you really need that class identity. I think a game like Overwatch actually does this really well. Granted, it's absolutely nothing like Battlefield, but nevertheless, when an enemy hero walks around the corner, you know exactly who it is regardless of the skin that they've chosen. Levolution. So just like most of you, I always thought Levolution was a really nice idea for Battlefield 4. They sort of built upon the destructibility that Battlefield games have become known for throughout the series, and they just took it one step further. If anything was a Battlefield moment, it was definitely some of these Levolution events. Now, whilst all players thought they looked really cool and were super epic, a lot of players disliked the way that they changed the map layouts. So Siege of Shanghai seems to be the biggest offender here, but also I think one of the coolest looking Levolutions. I also really dislike the Flood Zone Levolution event because it just turned the map into a giant swimming pool, and sometimes a squad of players would make it their mission to trigger these events almost as soon as the round started, so rather than having, half a round with the skyscraper up and half with it down, people would just go and trigger it right away, and you'd hardly ever actually get a chance to play in that skyscraper on C objective. So I think DICE should keep the Levolution events, but they need to be careful about how they actually affect the flow of the map. So in addition to Levolution, I think they should of course continue to improve upon the general destructibility of the maps and buildings. That's always been one of the coolest, most real parts of Battlefield, so definitely continue to make improvements there. Okay, next up we have Battlefield moments. Now I did go into this in more detail in an older video, so I'll link that one up above, because some of you may be asking what Battlefield moments are, and I suppose if you've only played Battlefield 5, you might not even know. So I'm talking about things like rendezvousing a jet, where you eject from your jet, turn around, RPG the guy who's tailing you, and then land safely in your jet again. or a run de snipe, which is basically the same thing, only you snipe the guy out of his cockpit instead. Then there were those awesome TV missile shots and incredible straw shots. The list goes on. You know what I'm talking about, that sort of stuff. We need a return to vehicles and weaponry that requires some real skill to do well with, and to allow us to recreate some of those fantastic Battlefield moments once again. Crossplay. Crossplay has been a massive success for Call of Duty, so why not Battlefield? Have the option to turn it off for those who don't want it, but having crossplay would be a positive thing for the game, I think. Better sound design. So again, I recently covered this in a video where I compared the sound of several Battlefield games and asked you guys which sounded the best. Interestingly enough, it was pretty even between Bad Company 2, BF3 and BF4, but it was quite clear that nobody liked the sound design of BF5, so DICE really need to take things back to the way they were. Okay guys, section 2 is going to be about the progression system. Now I'm not a big fan of the live service Tides of War type progression thing, nor am I a big fan of having an in-game currency like Company Coin for Battlefield 5, where you have to not only unlock weapons or specializations by playing, but also then buy them with Company Coin afterwards. The Battlefield 4 system were much better, I thought, where you simply level up a class and gadgets and weapons for that class, and then you unlock attachments by just getting kills with that weapon. It also looks like most people are voting for a return to premium rather than another live service model with battle passes. Now that's not to say that a proper live service can't be done well, but obviously nobody really trusts DICE to do it at this point, and with premium, you know, at least you know what you're going to be getting and you just pay for it once. Also, if they do implement crossplay, then premium wouldn't segregate the community the same way it always has done in the past. Honestly, with EA at the helm, I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for them to not implement a live service model, because that's almost certainly what they'll do just to make more money, but let's at least hope that it has proper support this time. 3 little letters. RSP. Rental Server Program. That's what we've had in all the other Battlefield games until Battlefield 5 came along. Let's have it back, please. Admin control, team balancing, customization, just keep it the way it used to be and I for one will be happy. I think it would be nice to also see some kind of a reward for players of previous Battlefield games. Alright, moving on, let's talk about weapons. As I briefly mentioned before, most of you seem in favour of getting rid of the in-game currency system. Another thing that Battlefield 4 had with the premium expansions was gadgets and weapons that were unlocked via the assignments, which had you basically complete objectives such as get 20 kills with a sniper rifle. Now most of these were fine in my eyes, and it was nice to have something extra to work towards each time a new expansion rolled in, but some of them were a little bit tough. I for one saw like a massive jump in subscribers when China Rising first came out for BF4, simply because one of the assignments to unlock the UCAV required you to get 3 jet fighter ribbons, and since most people had no clue how to fly the jets, they were all flocking to me to find out. So that was kind of funny, but maybe they need to be a little bit more arbitrary, but overall I kind of liked the assignment system. Okay, next, a lot of you wanted them to return to the attachment system for the weapons rather than the weapon specializations like we have in Battlefield 5. Obviously they couldn't really do the attachment system in BF5 because of the setting, but that's a grave they dug for themselves really. Some of the weapon specializations in BF5 were crazy, like vastly improving your weapon's fire rate. So I really think they should go to the attachment route that gives you like a small yet meaningful change to your weapon. Weapon balance, a big point of contention for Battlefield 5, and really something that's always been an issue in any FPS game. DICE really need to nail this. Obviously, without knowing what weapons there'll be in the game, I can't really make any suggestions, but it needs to be good. The TTK needs to be what Battlefield players are used to. Now, some people mentioned that they wanted to see a rebalancing of the recon class, whereby offensive recon would be viable again. I remember that's kind of how it was back in Bad Company 2. You had a lot of offensive recon players, and I always thought that's what DMRs were designed for, really. If you didn't want to hang back and use a bolt action sniper, you could grab a DMR and go on the offensive with your C4 in hand. But every class in Battlefield 4 could actually use DMRs and the carbines and the shotguns, so I felt that classes kind of lost their identity a little bit coming from BF3 to BF4. Now, it's true that BF5 has its faults, but personally I really liked the feel of sniping in that game. I don't know why I could never really get the hang of it in BF4, but in Battlefield 5 it just felt so snappy and clean and just came really naturally to me. It also felt super satisfying. Maybe you guys disagree with me on that one, I don't know, but I'd like to see that return. Alright, next up, suppression and 3D spotting. Most of you wanted to see these gone in the next Battlefield game, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. Suppression is not a particularly fun mechanic to be affected by, it feels pretty cheap. 3D spotting, this one is pretty much the same as suppression. I don't think most of us have missed it since it left, but I would say that air vehicles still need a way of spotting ground targets, so they'd need to look into something for that. Alright guys, let's move on to the next category. Let's talk about vehicles. Most of you seem to be in agreement to see vehicles return to being easy to use but hard to master. So bring back the flight mechanics of Battlefield 4, have planes and helis, spawn at a landing strip again where your team has its deployment instead of at some random area in the middle of the map or out over the ocean where you can easily get spawn killed. Bring back the instant entering and exiting vehicle animations. I've mentioned this before, but these animations that Battlefield 1 and 5 have are just really clunky. They don't make for good gameplay. Realistic, yes, but not very fun. I'd also like to see a return to some of the more skill-based weapons like TVs and tow missiles for helicopters and, JDAMs for the jets. Now, ammo resupply for vehicles, I think, should use the same model it did for Battlefield 4. In Battlefield 3, weapons had unlimited ammunition, and that was a little bit OP, In BF4, you had a few salvos, and then you had to basically wait until more ammo replenished. But in Battlefield 5, you had to physically fly back to a resupply station to get more bombs or more tank shells or to fully repair. In the end, the effect this had was that tankers would just camp by a resupply station and snipe infantry from afar. And pilots would basically just dogfight around their resupply station so they could constantly repair until the other pilot got bored and left. Another thing you guys mentioned is that you'd like to see some new vehicles. Battlefield 4 introduced attack boats and ribs, so why not have some battleships that we can actually take control of or something like that? I made a video on this specific subject, so if you want to check that out, I'll link that one down below as well. Okay, let's talk about lock-on weapons. I know a lot of you would probably like to see these removed altogether, but I actually don't mind them too much. But given their ease of use, I think they should be somewhat evadable, even without flares or ECM. So in Battlefield 3 there was this mechanic where if you turned into the incoming missile at just the right moment, it would actually overshoot you and explode without you flaring it. I'd love to see some mechanic like that. It's a big risk obviously because the margin for error is very large, and if you get hit, you're disabled and pretty much prey for the enemy. But it will be one of those things to ascend to, one more thing, to master within the game. However, I do think they should remove lock-ons such as active radar missiles. They're cheap, they give the pilot little to no warning, they're incredibly easy to use. Just get rid of them, they were never a good idea. Something else I would consider reworking whilst we're on the subject is APS, or the Active Protection System, which makes you invulnerable to all incoming damage for a few seconds. It's by far the best countermeasure for every vehicle that has it. There's zero reason to use smoke or any other countermeasure once you unlock APS. I don't know, it just feels a bit too good, being literally invulnerable to everything. But if they are going to keep it in the game, by God, remove it from the AA tank. A jet with ECM or flares versus an AA tank with APS is not a fair fight at all. Okay, for this last section there are a few more things on our little wish list, but none of them really fit into the previous categories, so I'm just going to go over these one by one. Okay, so maps and game modes. In terms of game modes, Conquest and Rush would be enough for me. There are always a ton of bloated game modes shoved into every FPS game these days, and nobody plays more than half of them. Conquest and Rush have always been the best game modes in Battlefield, so rather put time and effort into concentrating on those, maybe make some Rush only maps instead of converting Conquest maps into Rush maps. Just concentrate on quality over quantity. Local voice chat. Somebody mentioned this one. What do you guys think? Would you like to hear the screams down the end of the mic as you kill somebody, or nah? I have to say I find this pretty entertaining in Warzone, for example, so I wouldn't be against this personally, but any improvement on the voice chat system is always a good thing, since coordinating with your squad in Battlefield has always been a huge part of the game. What about an increase in player count and map size? These days, Battle Royale titles have 100 or even 150 players in one map, but is bigger always better? For me, I think 32 versus 32 is the sweet spot. It works really well. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, there are some things from Battlefield 5 I would like to see return. I mentioned the sniping earlier, but the vaulting and sliding system was a good addition to the game as well, and of course the level of detail. You know, the graphical fidelity of any Battlefield game has never been an issue, so that's why I haven't mentioned it up until now, but of course, we expect that it be improved upon wherever possible. Finally, I wanted to talk about the commander system. So in Battlefield 2, there was one player who had the commander role, and he could call in artillery strikes and UAVs, you know, that sort of stuff. And I think everybody wanted to be the commander. I mean, who wouldn't, right? So in that regard, it was a little unbalanced having the guy next to you with this access to a bunch of cool armaments. Now for Battlefield 4 we saw the return of the commander, but this time you had a player take on that role at the expense of actually playing the game, which basically led to nobody wanting to play the commander at all. Most of the servers simply disabled having commanders, or even in the ones that did, maybe one side had a commander and the other didn't, which was even worse. Then in Battlefield 5 they took a different approach of essentially having a commander for each squad. So if you were a squad leader, you could spend your squad's points on calling in an artillery strike or a smokescreen, for example. So it was nice to be in control of such firepower more often, but this then meant you had like 10 people running around calling in artillery strikes willy-nilly. Maybe not the most balanced thing either. So I think they need to find some middle ground here. They definitely need to integrate it into actually playing the game though. Nobody's going to play the commander role if you can't be a soldier at the same time. So that's it guys. Those are our combined suggestions for the next Battlefield title. I always thought it'd be a good idea to get our feedback over to DICE in some way before the next Battlefield title is announced, and that way if they screw it up at least we can say that we tried, right? So EA Play is right around the corner. It will be broadcast live on the 11th of June, and EA will be doing their game announcements and whatnot for the coming year. So if the next Battlefield title is set to release next year in 2021, I do expect we'll be seeing a very small little teaser of the game. If we don't see anything at all, no mention of it, well, it may well be that we won't be getting the next Battlefield until 2022, which I sincerely hope is not the case. Alrighty guys, I'm going to leave it there for today. Well done if you stuck this one out until the end. I know it was a long one. Hopefully I did a decent job of putting your thoughts and suggestions for the game down on paper, as it were. Once again, thank you to everyone who left comments for the video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, put all your thoughts and comments down there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.